Welcome, friends. Welcome to today's Reconsider It live stream. Welcome. Best live stream you're going to see all day. And here on this live stream, my friends, we are having a very exciting discussion-based, discussion-oriented stream, as opposed to a music-based stream. You do hear some music in the background. This is one of my instrumental live streams, on my unspoken streams, episode 3 from June 26, 2025. That's the music you hear in the background as we go through this stream today. Here in this stream, you're gonna get a deepened appreciation, deepened understanding, and practical ability to execute on the whole communication discussion and framework that we've been having in the previous discussion streams. I'm going to recap the important parts of that briefly, and then we're going to dive a little deeper. We'll talk about how it is that communication takes place in the first place, like what's the mechanisms by which that happens so that you can take advantage of it and become more successful yourself. And we talked a little bit in the previous streams about how to get a person's attention, like what is it that makes someone want to listen to you. But we're going to go a little deeper today. You're going to get a little further in the technique in terms of how do you help the person feel comfortable with you and be receptive to whatever it is you're trying to communicate to them or influence them with. I see Jack is in the place. Yes, our regular Jack with us. This is good. This is really good. Right now we are just hanging out. We're just kind of getting things warmed up right now. We are a whopping 2 minutes into the stream. We're just kind of getting the blood flowing. And my friends, I'm going to do your favorite participatory community building ritual. I'm going to do this right now. It's going to be really good. Because I need to celebrate you. You are here. Thank you for being here. Whether you're here with us live in the chat, like Jack is. Whether you are here with us live, but you are not in the chat. Or you are joining us after the live and you are watching on replay. However it is that you are here with us, thank you for being here. I have got my drink. I am going to make a clinking gesture. You are invited to join the rest of us as we cheers along and celebrate our togetherfulness. And it's all going to happen very, very soon, my friends. Oh, yes. On the count of 3, we're doing it. 1, 2, 3. Clink. Cheers, my friends. Oh, man, that's good. That is a good cheers moment. Thank you for being here for this very exciting cheers. Please like this video. Please subscribe. Friends, we are getting into this discussion. I see Moser is in the place. Yes, that is good. That is very good. As is Sahand. Welcome, welcome. As I like to say at the beginning of these discussion streams, and as you like to hear, these are meant to be more of a discussion, less of a lecture. I do have a little bit of content that I'll be having a little bit of a skeleton to the conversation. I will keep us mostly on target, but it's okay to bring up whatever, and you might have something to add to this. You might have something you need me to repeat or follow up on. You may have any such thing that you might sincerely have as part of this discussion. So, with that in mind, my friends, I am going to deliver on my promise to keep you very empowered here for communication and influence purposes. By the way, in addition to you just getting some cool tips and insights and tools as a part of these discussions, as an FYI, this is what I'm sharing with you now and thus far in the previous discussion streams. The majority of that, with a couple exceptions here and there, These are things that I do professionally. So I am partly telling you, here's some cool things that I like, and here's my little spin on it and stuff like that. But I have been an educator for 25 years, just short of 25 years. Oh, it's like 24 years and 11 months before I formally started getting paid as an educator. So 25 years basically. And in the past 20 years, I've done this kind of stuff, like how to communicate in a somewhat formal setting. So, like, you're leading a discussion of whatever. This is relevant if you're having a meeting, you're giving a presentation, you're a musician on stage communicating with your audience, you're a live streamer, you're a podcaster, you're trying to communicate and be engaging. This kind of stuff. I have taught that professionally for a number of years. It's probably been over between 10 and 15, let's say like 12 or 13 years, somewhere in the middle there. I have taught in my entire 25 years as an educator. I've taught thousands of people. I've coached people one on one on how to do this stuff. So I've coached hundreds of people. I've seen a lot of variety across a lot of different, for some people, this stuff comes pretty naturally. For others, it doesn't. Some of them have read up on this kind of stuff and they sort of know where I'm coming from already. Some of them, this is like the most eye-opening, illuminating stuff they've ever heard in their life. So you're going to be somewhere in all of that. And I'm prepared for whatever follow-ups you may have. I see OJ is with us. That's nice. That's good. As is Owen. Yeah, Crazy Rabbit. Dope. Crazy Rabbit is with us. So you got a lot of wealth of experience coming at you right now, as well as some formal knowledge. And this stuff I just like doing. So I'm merging things that I'm passionate about. I happen to lead. I'm one of the owners and leads of this whole entire program at my organization. So that's pretty good. I lead a team of about 30 coaches. So I'm pretty with it on this topic. You are in very good hands with me. So I promise you I'd give you a recap. Of the previous streams, the parts that are relevant here. This is all built, everything I'm talking about on this stream right now is built upon the communication framework, the communication foundation that I established in the first 2 live streams. And in those streams, I talked about the idea of drivers in computer engineering. To briefly recap, Crazy Rabbit's already talked about the drivers in the chat. That's good. We have got the idea of drivers between 2 pieces of hardware. They need to have a thin piece of software between them called the driver that enables them to communicate. They got to swap ones and zeros and be able to know what the ones and zeros mean. That's not part of the hardware. It's this thing called the driver that enables it. So that's pretty good. So we got these drivers, and everybody has them to take it to the human level. Everybody has their way of interpreting signals. Whether you're talking about language, you're talking about body language, you're talking about some kind of cultural references, you're talking about some kind of posturing or signaling. The way people interpret these things is determined by their so-called driver, and that's what everything that I'm talking about is built upon. So this idea that everyone has this unique means of interpreting their world, basically. Cool. So we have the idea of drivers. I'm with it. But I took that a little further in what was episode 2 and said, wouldn't it be nice if you could use this to your advantage and you not only had just, okay, everybody has different ways of interpreting things. What if you could somehow maximize your capacity to communicate using that insight? And the answer is you can. Whoa. And that's what we talked about in episode 2, where you have the basic idea of when you're in communication mode, that your task is not to express yourself to just have have mastery over your capacity to send a signal in a way you think makes sense, but rather to speak as much as possible within the terms of what the other person's receiving drivers are. So if some person believes that this or that means this or that, the way you say something, the choice of words you use, body language, or any of this kind of stuff, how the other person is going to interpret it forms the foundation of effective communication. And so that's what this whole driver analogy is meant to illuminate. Just say, hey, look at this idea that different people interpret things differently. And if you want to be a successful communicator, you should, to the best of your capacity, be speaking in terms of what the other person is ready to hear. Okay, pretty good. I like it. In the second episode, we build upon that framework. So we say, all right, different people have different interpretive layers for interpreting what this or that means. That's cool. I got it. And also, if you want to be a successful communicator, you should speak in terms of what the other person is ready to hear and they'll be receptive to. Okay, cool. That's nice. But then in episode 2, I believe it was at the end of it, I also talked about these are not absolutely bulletproof. These are just like strong, let's say like strong general directions for you to aim in. That's what these are. 3 directions that you could use when framing the way you're trying to talk in terms of the other person's driver, in terms of how they're going to interpret things. You use their language and their symbolism and their whatever. And what do you talk about? Now we have the 3 things, the 3 ways of framing your content, whether you are indeed leading a meeting or leading a class or leading a live stream or whatever it is you're doing. The things that tend to get people's attention are, in no particular order, this thing I'm talking about is very empowering for you. Look how it enables you to do this. Look at how you are more successful at that. Look at how this becomes more of a whatever for you and you have a lot more options in life. Look at how, and anything along these lines, the person has more potential, more power, more ability. That's one of the 3 main things that I generally coach people on in terms of how to get someone's attention, how to get the attention of your audience. So you say this thing's going to help you, it's going to empower you, whatever route you take there. The next one, again, in no particular order, the next one is pleasure. So this is somehow good for you. You're going to enjoy this. This is going to feel good. Anything along these lines. It's going to feel fulfilling when you complete this. Anything like that. That's pleasure. So we got empowerment. You are somehow empowering the audience with what you're talking about. Or this is going to give them pleasure. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to like it. Or the final one is it's some kind of strategy, perhaps creative strategy or otherwise strategy for avoiding something they want to avoid, some kind of pain or something they're afraid of, or something that's like it's difficult, arduous, something they'd rather avoid, or you want to save them some time. Oh man, you would have had to labor away at this for 3 hours, but with my new gadget, this will only take you 20 minutes. They'll be like, yes, I am on board with saving. What did I just tell you? 3 hours and 2 hours and 40 minutes. I'm on board with saving 2 hours and 40 minutes. So this sort of thing. It's a strategy for avoiding something, lost your time or what have you. I see Jack is coming through. If you do have questions, thank you for putting the Q in front there. Are gestures an effective way to focus attention? How about pauses? When you say gestures, I assume you're talking about physical gestures, like hand motions and things like that. Are those an effective way to focus attention? If indeed that's what you're talking about, I would say in the context that I'm referring to here, which is like leading a conversation in somewhat formally, whether that is a live stream or a musician on stage, or professionally you're leading a meeting or leading some kind of class. If you are in that kind of capacity where you are the like formally recognized leader of the conversation, in that case, I would say it's best to minimize your hand gestures. You see, I'm doing that a little bit, and that's part of like my personal natural mode of expression. But I'm not doing things like formal body postures or things like this. At least I'm not intending to do things like that. Maybe I am. Maybe I should watch that a little more closely. The reason I say that you should minimize your body language. Yeah, I'm not saying you have to like stay there. You can't see totally, but my arms are, you know, at my sides, formally rigid. I'm not saying you need to do that, but just sort of relaxed at your sides mostly. You see, I have mine up. This is my resting position, but mostly at a resting position is the sort of thing I recommend. Not a lot of motion. If you have a lot of motion, then that can communicate anxiety, nervousness, even if you don't mean it that way. Even if you're not nervous or anxious, it can communicate that. And so that can erode your credibility, which is actually what this stream is going to be about. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Jack was also asking a second part of that question. How about pauses? Yeah. Yeah, pauses for sure. Pauses are really good. Pauses are most effective when you have their undivided attention the most, you know, consistently. So I would say pauses are not something you start with. Pauses are something that you implement when they're already listening to you and hanging on your every word. Then you can drop in the 2 or 3 second pause, and when you pick up, they're like, "Oh, I couldn't wait to hear what you had to say about that." So that's how to implement pauses. A little bit more developed moment in the attention grabbing and maintenance process rather than to start. By the way, let me know if there's any follow ups to that as well. And for everyone else, whether you're with us live in the chat or you're watching us after the live, uh, let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comments, as Jack is doing, any follow ups you have on any of this stuff. So this is good. We got to a point where we had the idea of drivers as a metaphor for how people have their own unique interpretive framework of things, language, and everything else. We also talked about how you would speak in terms of someone else's driver in order to communicate with them effectively. And then you got the three ways to get someone's attention as vague directions to meditate in. Namely, how is your message empowering them? How is your message good for them pleasurably, subjectively? And also, how is your message giving them some kind of strategy, something they can use to their advantage in order to avoid some kind of difficulty or pain or some such business like that? Cool. All of that's great. So if you're following and implementing all of that, and you're experimenting with some of the techniques that I shared with you in the prior streams, then at that point you're getting their attention. This helps you to captivate them, your audience, whatever that might be. Whether that's some sort of professional setting, leading a meeting, giving a presentation, leading a class, leading a live stream, a musician on stage or other performer on stage to an audience, whatever it is, you have a way to get their attention. The key is to sneeze. The key is to sneeze and then blow your nose. That's a pretty integral part of the whole attention getting and maintenance process, as I just demonstrated. The other piece of this, though, now we're caught up to the previous streams, at least the parts that are relevant to today's discussion. or caught up to the previous streams, but they still are missing one element, which is necessary for your audience to receive what you're saying. So everything up until now, this is like you've gotten them to open up. You've gotten them to be ready to listen by speaking their language and by framing it in terms of, hey, this is empowering for you, or you frame it in terms of, you're going to love this is going to feel good, or you frame it in terms of, look at how this is going to be helpful for you as a strategy to avoid that discomfort or pain or other thing they want to avoid. So they're open to hearing, they're open to listening. But even though they're open to listening, they still have to trust you. They have to trust specifically you, because you're the one talking at them. You're the one who is promising them that this is going to empower them, this is going to be pleasurable for them, this is going to be a useful strategy for them. They still need to trust you that you're actually going to deliver on the goods. And so this next element here, how do you establish trust? That's another formal step in the process that, now you're getting net new content. This is not part of the previous streams at this point. Everything thus far has just been a recap of the previous streams. But now you have to get your audience to trust you, to believe that they can trust you, to believe that you can deliver on what you're promising them. And when I'm coaching people, I mentioned earlier that I've coached hundreds of people, I lead a coaching program and all this. When I'm coaching people, this is almost always one of the top things that I coach people on. And it's very simple, the way to establish trust with your audience, to help your audience to believe that you can actually help them, or what you're saying is somehow good for them in whatever way you promise them, whatever is your sales pitch, whatever is your selling point. Well, why should they trust you? There are two ways that people tend to interpret this word trust when I'm coaching them or teaching a class on this topic. There's two ways that people tend to, they hear that word trust and it means different things to different people. It's almost as if different people have a different interpretive framework for things, including down to the level of individual words. P.S. They do. Oh, by the way, I see Ed Kalunga is here. I didn't call out Ed earlier. Shout out to Ed. So we got this need to have your audience trust you. And when I'm coaching people, it's almost always one of the top things that I coach people on. But it's simple. There's a simple way to get your audience to trust you. And there's a very short version of it. Like very, very, very short version of it in like what, one sentence, maybe two sentences. The short version of how to get your audience to trust you is to demonstrate that you're giving them whatever it is you promised them. You got their attention in one of those three ways by saying it's either empowering your audience, what you're telling them, or it is pleasurable to your audience, the thing you're giving them, or it is strategically advantageous to your audience. Whatever it is you promise them, as long as you can now give your audience the perception that you're delivering on that promise, that's it. They're going to listen to what you have to say. That's the whole thing. It's in one simple summary right there. Now there's a lot of nuance in how to convey that, and I'm going to share some of that with you right now. But as long as you keep in mind that as long as you give your audience this sense that they're receiving what you got their attention with. Like they gave you their attention for a reason. They need to know that it was worth the giving of your attention, or their attention rather. They need to feel like, all right, I gave you my attention. Like, is this worth my attention? That, like, how do you make them feel like, okay, this is good. I'm going to get it, or I am getting it. How do you give them that sense? So the short version of how to do that is you talk about how you've done it previously. That's one straightforward way, one systematic way to do it. And I've done a lot of that on this stream, actually. If you were to rewind the video and count how many times, or look at a transcript of the video and count how many times I talk about what I do with all of this content, and I say things like, "Oh, I'm a professional. I lead a program on coaching people on this. I've coached hundreds of people. I lead classes on this. I've written classes on this. I've written books on this. Books meaning like training materials. It is technically a book, but I told you a lot of times that I do this stuff professionally, and I'm giving you a lot of just like a confident rundown. Da, 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 da. And that's because I actually do know this stuff. And this is not an act. I genuinely know this, and I've been doing it for many years. And everyone I've ever coached tells me how much uh, improvement, that they're shocked at how much improvement they make, even with just like a half hour of informal coaching. So you actually are in very good hands with me on this. And my job is to help you to know that, and to help you to feel that. And the only way to do that is by telling you. The more that I can give you a visual, the more that you can almost like see me sitting down next to someone, coaching them on how they're gonna speak to their audience, whether it's professionally like I do. You're going to give a presentation, you're going to lead a meeting, you're going to lead a class of some kind. Or if it's in a context, like I was saying earlier, leading a live stream, leading a performance of some sort, like a musician on stage, whatever all those things are, the more vividly you can help your audience to get a visual, to almost see you, to imagine you doing the thing, that's where you build trust from most strongly. That's the most powerful way to build trust. Unless you could demonstrate it right then and there. If there's something you could do right then and there that would show that you know what you're talking about, that's even better. But short of that, then just talk about when you've done it previously. I see Jack has a comment. Jack says, how could a speaker use a leading question to encourage the listener? It depends what you mean by a leading question. That's another thing that could mean different things to different people. There's one type of question that I would say is appropriate for any of these contexts that we're talking about, whether it's, professionally leading a meeting or it's a live stream or anything. There is one type of question that's effective no matter what the context is, if you're speaking. And that is something that in my system, I call this an active question, an active learning, or an active listening question. And it's similar to a leading question in some ways in my lexicon. But an active listening question or an active learning question is a very, very, very straightforward question that has just like a yes no type of thing, or a true false, or some very, very clear, stark binary that's easy. And it should also be a question that like anyone would agree on. Anybody would clearly know the answer to it. That's a good situation in which to use this technique. So that's the kind of situation where you could just make a statement about it. You could just describe the thing because you're so confident that the thing is obvious and whoever's listening to you is going to agree with it. Most of the time, naturally, you would just say a sentence that ends in a period. That's the situation where you would use the technique I'm about to describe that I call an active listening or an active learning technique, or a question technique, sorry. And it is that you simply take whatever you would have said and make it into a simple question. And you can do it with any type of question at all. So I could even take what I'm saying right now and turn it into a question. So do you think I could do that? Do you think I could take anything I'm saying and turn it into a question? I could. I definitely could do that, and it would be very straightforward. And when I phrase it as a question, is that like a little bit more engaging for you? It is. It's a slight bit more engaging if I phrase it as a question, and that's something you're very comfortable with and you know. So, should you use questions like this once in a while? Yeah, yeah, you should. Does this spice it up a little bit and make it a little bit more engaging? It does. It does. It does. And does this technique work and make you a little more engaged, even though you know I'm using the technique? Does it still work? Yeah, it does. It does. You're still a little bit more engaged. So yeah, that technique is very effective, and that's one that I I encourage and recommend in almost everybody. That one comes up often. That's an easy win, a very easy win. And I call that one active learning or active listening. There's another one that I do call a leading question. So this is going back to Jack asked about the leading question. The leading question is good in a context where you have interaction with your audience. Like your audience is more or less with you in real time. That's when you can use a leading question. If that's not the case, then I would not recommend this type of question because in my dictionary, when I use the term leading question, it means the following. This is what a leading question is for me. A leading question is where there's some, element of whatever it is you're talking about, whatever that might be. Like right now, I'm talking to you about how to effectively communicate and lead a conversation. That's what we're talking about. So when there's some element of that you need to convey to your audience, there's some, bullet point or whatever that you need to talk about, or some maybe you're going to make a transition into a new phase of your live stream or something. There's something you need to convey. And you could just tell them. It's kind of simple. Like I'm about to give you a simple formula. There's something I'm about to tell you. So if there's something to tell you, there is a way that you can frame it in this leading question type of thing, but only when certain conditions apply. And when I'm coaching people, this formula is something that they usually tell me is very helpful. It's very actionable. And this is also illuminating. People tell me this is illuminating because it's like, oh, that's why it works sometimes but not other times. It's like, right, you have to follow the formula. So what is the formula? Let's see, what is the formula? The formula is as follows. You can only use this technique when, first, there is a specific correct answer to the thing you're going to ask them. So it's not an open-ended question. It's not like, what do you think about blah, 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 blah? And anybody could just share their opinion about whatever. That's a different type of question that you would use in a different situation. But in this one, we're talking about there is a right and wrong. Like 2 plus 2 is 4. There is a right or wrong answer. So that's the first condition for a leading question to work effectively. There has to be a right or wrong answer. The second question, or the second aspect to it, the second component of the formula is that you have not told them it yet. You didn't tell them this correct answer. So there is a correct answer, but you didn't get to it yet. That's the second part of the formula. The third part of the formula is they can reasonably, your audience can reasonably figure it out in 2 or 3 seconds, 5 seconds, something like that. Pretty short amount of time. If all those three conditions are met, once again, the three conditions are the question you're going to ask has a specific correct answer. Second, you didn't tell them it yet. You didn't talk about this topic yet. So you're not asking them to remember something. That's a key element to this. You didn't tell them yet. You're not asking them to remember. That means they're going to have to figure it out. And that's the reason that this technique works. Because people like to figure things out and then, show off a little. That's why this technique works. So there is a correct answer. You didn't tell them. They have to figure it out. And they can do it pretty quickly. Nobody's gonna engage with you if they have to figure it out over 2 minutes. No, it's got to be just 2 or 3 seconds. A straightforward. Oh, you know what? Since you said this, since you said that, it's probably this. Yeah, you got it. Nice. That's a leading question. And if that's what you're talking about, Jack, a leading question, I would say those are really effective, but use them sparingly. And you gotta hit a home run with those. They require a little bit of investment. So only do them with like you're sure you got something that your audience is going to be able to know and communicate to you. That's why I said earlier that this one requires real-time interaction. They got to be able to communicate it back to you. That's a leading question. The other one I described earlier, where you just ask a question, an obvious question, and then you answer it yourself. Do you need to have the audience there to answer that back? No. So can you ask that previous question type? Can you ask those active listening questions where you just phrase it as a question? Can you just ask those regardless of whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, you're live or you're watching this after live? Do those types of questions still work? Yeah, they do. And is that why I recommend those very heavily? It's one of the reasons, yeah. But this other one, this leading question type, that one, they got to be able to respond to you. So that one is you got to have a lot of setup. But when they work, yeah, you could get what do you say, a grand slam? Is that where you get bases are loaded and then you hit a home run? That's called a grand slam. Yeah, leading question can be good in that context. I see Warhearts has joined us. Yes, that's good. Warheart singular asks where the restroom is. So right over there. That way. Warheart has another suggestion. Which is to make your idea seem like their idea. I would agree. If you can lead someone to something that you want them to arrive at. One of my colleagues used to describe it like this. He used to say, start with the thing you want them to arrive at. Start with the conclusion, or start with the answer, I guess. Whatever the thing you want them to arrive at, and then ask a question that would result in that answer. So it kind of works backward like that to come up with those sorts of guiding a conversation. That takes a lot more than a leading question. That's pretty advanced to make your audience believe that they came up with the idea on their own. That's 100% a technique, but it's pretty advanced. One thing, since we're talking about questions, one thing that often I observe in the hundreds of people who I've observed and coached. By the way, you can think about why I keep bringing that up. Why do I keep talking about the fact that I have coached hundreds of people and there's patterns in it? What I'm doing is I'm making you think of me as someone who does that, so that when I tell you things, you'll believe me more. I'm demonstrating for you the technique of establishing trust. Warhart says he has experience writing that way as well, with the conclusion in mind. Yeah. So, to go back to the idea of just generally establishing trust, I gave you one primary method, the primary technique that I coach my coachees uh, using, which is to help your audience to feel like they're getting the thing that you promised them. That's the very high level of it. But how do you do that? My primary technique that I suggest is either demonstrate it right then and there, do the thing, if that's possible. If you can show them the thing that now they believe that you can do it. But if you can't do that, which that's the more common case, if you can't demonstrate whatever it is that you're trying to talk to them about, then the best thing you can do after that is just talk about previous times you have. Get as vivid as you can to give them a visual. That's the technique. That was the first branch of establishing trust. I mentioned that there are two main ways that people interpret that. Like when I coach them and I talk about establishing trust, their mind goes in one of two directions based on their schemas, or not schema. Well, yes, schemas, but based on their drivers. And the one I talked about, which is something like competence. You have the competence to help. You really do know what you're talking about. That's one that's one interpretation of trust. The other interpretation of trust is more like a personal trust. Like I feel safe with you kind of trust. And there is a technique for that as well. So I'm going to give you that too. We have the two types of trust. And you got the one that's the competence. I'm going to give you now the personal touch. How do you do that? Well, there is a parallel. There is a parallel. The first type of trust, I would generally, in my framework, call that credibility. You have credibility. You are competent. You are actually capable of helping on the topic you're talking about. Cool. I'm with it. But in addition to credibility, the other branch of trust, in my framework, I call that rapport. Rapport. That is to say, you have a genuine connection, a personal connection. That's where that comes from. It comes from a genuine connection. And this is always great when I'm training people on this or I'm coaching people on this because the primary technique, which I'll give you right now, and we're going to elaborate a little more. The primary technique is simply to share what you are genuinely passionate about. What do you actually think is cool? What do you actually get excited about? Now, the best thing you could do is bring that up, bring that out in the context of what you're talking about. So, like for me, I get to put a smile on my face when I talk about when I'm coaching people or anything, because I actually do genuinely like that. I love that part of my professional career that I'm able to do this kind of coaching and education. It's a great passion. So, you get to see a little bit of that. You can see a little bit of that right now. But if that's not possible, let's say, as I say, all these techniques are applicable anytime you are formally speaking, that you're recognized as the one leading the conversation, professionally leading meetings, presentations, coaching, training is the word I'm looking for. Training, teaching classes, lead a live stream, a performer, leading an audience, or whatever it is. All these techniques apply equally in all those domains. if you're able to infuse your passions and what you genuinely care about, what you like, what just means a lot to you, what motivates you, what you like really think is important, anything like that. But but the key is it has to be genuine to you. You can't fake this unless you're a trained actor. You know? If you're an actor, okay, maybe you can. But DLO says you are at the perfect distance from the camera right now. Cool, that's good. I like to hear that. So that's the second branch. The first branch is what I'm calling credibility, where you convey your competence by helping your audience to see that you know what you're talking about. You've really done this. You've really been involved with this thing. You're not just, making this up out of nowhere. Some people are a little surprised, by the way, to hear that it's not really based on your competence, that they can trust what you say. It's not really based on things like citing, evidence of whatever. You're not writing up a scientific paper where you need to do citations. That's not what it's like leading an audience. It's a different. Your credibility doesn't come from citing other people. It that would hurt your credibility, actually. Your credibility. I'm talking about making you a very powerful speaker. That comes from you doing it. So that's the primary method for the credibility branch of trust. The other one, what do you genuinely really love? What do you actually care about? What do you really think matters? That's the other branch, other branch of trust. You bring that out inside of your, you know, live stream that you're doing, or your in the bar where you're playing your musician gig, or at work you're leading a presentation or whatever. If you could put it in your topic, in your subject, all your passion, what you really love and care about, awesome. Having worked with hundreds of people, I know that that's not always possible. That's not always possible. Oftentimes, if you're doing something at work and you have to give a presentation, you're kind of doing it because you have to. And so, hey, Probes is with us. Yes, my man. So if you're in that position where you're formally giving this presentation or what have you, in let's say a professional context, you don't really care about it. It's not really matching your passions. You're just the person who this is assigned to, or something like that. Something where you don't have a genuine passion in the thing you're delivering, in your message you're communicating. If that's the case, then you can spice it up with some little joke if you are a humor person. Don't it's good for you to be honest with yourself if you're a human person or not. If you are a humor person, cool. Very light humor here and there. Do it. If you are not a humor person, don't try to do it. That's okay. There's any number of other ways you can share your passions. You can. Some people are really good at just like being bright and smiley and radiating their passion, expressing their passion, sort of like in a physiological way. You can hear it in their voice. If you have any way of like dialing up your voice a little bit, that's one way that you could emphasize that you're bringing your passions. Your passions give your audience something to connect to, something to touch. It's every bit as necessary as the credibility branch. They have to feel you just like they have to know that you are real. So there's both of those. They have to know that you're the real deal, and they have to also feel you. You're your own unique flavor that they need to taste. I see this world needs a hero is with us. Yes, that's really good. That's really good. As I say, you can put in a little bit of humor. You can put in like little references to like one thing that I sometimes will do is I reference comic book stuff because I like comic book stuff a lot. I'm very much into that, just straight up personally. I like comic book stuff, and so I might, if I'm leading a class, I might just randomly mention like, "Oh, did anybody see the new Superman movie that came out a couple months ago?" I'll just like throw that in. If we're in a long stretch of some, very difficult thing that we've been going on for 20, 30 minutes and I need to bring some life back into the room, I'll just bring some stuff that I care about. And why do I bring up stuff that I care about? And why should you? Why would you bring up things you care about? Here's the reason. Because what you care about is inexhaustible. That's the reason for it. That's the technique. If you lean into what you genuinely care about, what is genuinely driving you and you love, you could just go on and on and on about it. And not only does it give your audience something to connect to and a reason to like want it. That's what this does, by the way. It makes them want the thing. That's what your passions and your rapport. It makes them want it. That's the function it provides. So anyway, you can go on and on if it's something you genuinely care about, or it's a genuine expression of your passion, or whatever it is. However that fits you like a glove, but it's the real you. And those are the two branches. That's what this stream was about. This whole live stream here was building up to exactly this moment. You now have the next step in the way that you communicate effectively and get your audience to want to know what you're going to say. They trust that what you say is going to be good. You're going to be delivering on what you promised them. And also, because you're bringing your genuine passion into it, they connect and they want a little more. That's the step. That's it, my friends. So I'm going to do a brief recap at this point. For those of us who are here in the live, if you have any follow-ups about any of this stuff, let me know. Or if you have more to add, there's been a couple of things in the chat already today that you've added. Those are good too. Aside from the fact that I sneezed earlier, I don't know how obvious it is to you that I have like a very congested sinus at the moment. It's kind of affecting me a little. You ever had sinus problems? You ever had sinus issues where it's like it's distracting? I have a little bit of that. I have that as a chronic thing, and I'm having a little bit of it right now. Jack says that's a good tip. A nice way to reboot after a lot of content. Warheart says I could hear the congestion. Okay, good. In my mind, it feels obvious, but I don't know how obvious it is to you. But Warheart says, yeah, I could hear it. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna do a recap, and then that's the stream. That's the stream, my friends. We know at this point, based on what has happened in previous streams, up through this stream now, we know that there's this idea that everyone, every person, every individual is an individual, and they have their own unique interpretive framework. They have their own unique means of making sense of their experiences. I'm calling that a driver, like the computer engineering driver, meaning they have a set of instructions. People on some kind of subconscious level have a set of instructions that tells them when you hear this, it means this. When you observe this, it means that, and so on. They have their own way of interpreting, and everybody's unique. The insight then, building upon that, as you've heard, this is your recap. Knowing that people's interpretive framework, their interpretive layers, their drivers, knowing that that's where their meaning comes from. Meaning is, it's not like you're sending a message through space and they're catching it like a baseball. That's not what's happening. It's that you're sending this ambiguous message, but their drivers interpret it. And you can take advantage of that if you have some sense of who you're talking to. You know your audience a bit. You know how they're going to interpret this. You know what is impactful for them. You know what they're going to want to listen to. Now you can start talking their language. And that's the inside of drivers. You got to speak their language, not the one you want to express. If you just want to do what you want to express, that goes in the realm of art. Go over there. That goes in the realm of art, which is legit. That's a thing. It's just not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about communication. Communication, you talk their language, not yours. So that's the first bit of review. We continue the review, my friends, because you can speak someone's language, and there's three main things that you could use to get their attention. You say whatever you're going to do is empower them, kind of like on this stream, where I talk about how all of these insights empower you to communicate more effectively. I say that all the time on these streams. There's a lot of times, if you were to go back and count, how many times do I say things like, and this is going to make you more effective at communicating, and now you're going to be able to do this. There's been quite a few times that I did that. So empowerment, that's one way you can get your audience's attention. Or you're going to love this. This is going to be so satisfying. This is going to feel good. Pleasure. Pleasure is another way you get your audience's attention. And the third way is with strategy. Look at how this helps you avoid that bad thing. It helps you avoid pain. It helps you avoid tedium. All of this. Now, the new parts from today, our final part of the recap. The new parts from today are that so far, those three motivators, empowerment, pleasure, strategy, those just convince your audience to kind of perk up and pay attention. But if you're going to be communicating with them, they have to do more than just pay attention. They have to pay attention and believe that what you're telling them is trustworthy. So you have to establish trust. And here today on this stream, I gave you two main ways of working with this idea of trust. The first one was a way of credibility, which essentially means competence, just like technical competence. You can deliver on the promise you made. That's the credibility part. The other aspect of trust is rapport, or the personal touch, personality. What is your passion? They need to feel that this matters to you. They need to feel that there's something to connect with. Those are the two branches of trust. And here today on this stream, you got the ways to establish them. How do you convince someone of your competence? Ideally, you demonstrate it right there. But if you can't demonstrate it, which is usually the case, then you simply talk about, you share stories, you tell them about previous times that you've done this or you were involved with this. Talk about actions, talk about things you do. That's where the credibility comes from. That's where competence comes from. That was the first branch of building trust. Now your audience is ready to believe that what you say is good. But in order for them to want it and to feel like, yeah, I like this, I'm having a good time listening to you, that wanting, that comes from a personal touch, comes from passion. What do you care about? What makes you wake up in the morning? What gets you excited? What makes you smile? And all this kind of stuff. And this is pretty empowering because there's a lot you can explore in all of this in your own communications. This communication applies, all of these techniques, they apply in any situation where you are recognized as the one leading the discussion. And that could be leading a class, leading a presentation, leading a meeting, leading a live stream, leading a performance of some sort. And it could even just be your little slice of time when you're leading a conversation with your intimate partner. Okay, this is my time to talk. Okay, maybe there's a little thing like that. It could come in micro doses like that. I have a couple sentences at a time. Whenever you're the one speaking and it's formally recognized, that's when all of the stuff I'm talking about applies. And so there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of pluripotence, if you will, for you to apply all these things. So that's good, very empowering. Friends, we're going to continue going on with these discussion-based streams. Please like this video. Please subscribe. I could use some subs. Join us again for these discussion streams, my friend. We're going to keep talking about this topics in this domain of communication, of I'm going to start introducing more on the topic of influence. We had the topic of questions, so I can introduce topics related to interactivity, because we didn't talk about that yet. That's a pretty important element as well. How do you get interactivity? We talked a little bit about the questions today. That's one way, but there's a lot of different methods, a lot of different approaches or techniques you could use. So that's more within the domain of things that I train people on, and I've been working with for a long time, many years. Friends, I hope to see you in the next discussion stream. Until then, please have a very wonderful rest of your day. Please have a very blessed and healingful rest of your day today. Please have an amazing and wonderful rest of your day today. And I will see you on the next Reconsider It live stream.